Let's talk about maximizing growth during the vegetative stage. Whether you're growing photoperiod or autoflower plants, there are a few key things that you can do to dramatically increase growth speed and vigor. Let's start with lighting, more specifically light spectrum, because this is something that has changed over the years. Now you warp back 15 years ago and you ask what spectrum should you run in the veg stage, and a lot of people would say a blue heavy spectrum. Back then, the majority of growers were using HID grow lights. They would use metal halide in veg, which were more blue heavy, and then switch to HPS in the flower stage for better flower development. These days, some growers flip-flop that, well, to a point. Especially with autoflower plants, a lot of people are running more heavy red in the spectrum for the veg stage in order to get a bigger plant. Now, I have seen some folks that run photoperiod that do the same technique. And then towards the end of flowering, like the final 2 to 3 weeks, they're switching back to that heavy blue spectrum in order to drive that secondary metabolite development. Now, somebody might mention that going to a red heavy spectrum in the veg stage is going to lead to longer internodes. And that's why they run a blue spectrum, which will lead to a more compact plant, tighter internodes. So feel free to experiment as you wish, but I thought that was pretty clever that people are now going more towards red in order to get a bigger plant in the veg stage. Let's talk about light cycle next, and I feel like the most common light cycle for the veg stage is 18-6. 18 hours with the grow lights on, 6 hours of complete darkness. Now, if you're looking to maximize growth in the veg stage, you might want to consider going to a 24-0 light cycle, 24 hours with lights on, 0 hours of darkness. A lot of growers run that still to this day, and they swear by faster growth. However, some people claim that there are downsides, that the plant needs rest and that the microbes in the medium need that rest. I think the jury's still out on which way is better, but you might want to experiment with running a 24-0 light cycle if you're looking to maximize veg growth. Moving on to PAR, photosynthetically active radiation. This is the energy that the plants use in order to grow. Now, the general range that you may often hear is for the veg stage between 400 and 600 ppfd. However, that's really going to depend on your light cycle, right? That's pretty good for an 18-6 light cycle, but if you're on a 24-0 light cycle, you may want to adjust that a little bit. And it really comes down to DLI, daily lighting integral. This is the amount of light that the plant can actually take and use per day. Generally speaking, I think a lot of people aim for around 40 DLI, but upwards of 60 DLI has been studied. Now, when you increase light levels like that, you also want to make sure your environment's dialed in. CO2 supplementation is often very helpful. We'll talk about CO2 here in a little bit. But yeah, for that 400 to 600 ppfd, that's for an 18-6 light cycle. You may want to adjust that to make sure you're not giving too much light throughout the day if you're on a different light cycle than that. Next, let's get into environment. If you're looking to maximize growth in the veg stage, paying attention to the environment is super important. An easy way to think about this is the lower the temperature, the more the plant kind of slows down a little bit. And that includes the microbes in the medium as well. Me personally, if I'm looking for fast growth, I'm running about 80 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit in the veg stage. Now, some genetics can go higher than that. I've heard 85, 87, and I've experimented with those temperatures in the past, but I found that some genetics really can't handle that high of temps. So safe range for me, for most genetics, I feel like 95% of genetics are going to be able to grow really well in 80 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. When I get higher than that, some genetics I can start to see some signs of heat stress there. Hand in hand with that is relative humidity, which a lot of growers monitor. In the veg stage, it's very common to be over 60%, sometimes over 70% relative humidity. But talking about relative humidity, I guess these days we can kind of say is a little outdated. A lot of people are going after VPD now. So if you're one of those folks that track VPD, 0.8 to 1.2 kPa is what is said to be ideal in the veg stage. That VPD range is best for the stomata opening, which of course relates directly to the rate of photosynthesis. Air circulation. This is something that people often put to the back burner, but is really super important if you're looking to maximize growth. Or I should say, not stunt growth, because if you've got no air circulation, well then the leaf has the same batch of air kind of around, and there can be a lack of CO2, and the plants need CO2 in order to grow, right? I personally like to have at least one fan kind of more above, blowing air through the canopy as well as just above the canopy. Then I place another fan down low, so it's getting the lower part of the plant and through any branches that are down there as well. Supplementing CO2 will absolutely help with growth in the veg stage, and also the flower stage as well, but this video we're talking about the veg stage. The natural CO2 level outdoors is between 400 and 450 ppm. If you're indoors in a controlled environment, you can actually increase that amount and get faster growth. A rough range is anywhere between 800 and 1400 ppm ppm. There's many studies out there on CO2. One study in particular that I know of from Utah State University, shout out to Dr. Bruce Bugbee. I took his cannabis cultivation course, and in that course it mentions a study that happened where they had 1400 ppm and they saw a 30% increase in yield. Now, of course, they supplemented CO2 in the flower stage as well in order to get that result, but definitely wanted to mention CO2 as something that can really increase growth speed. Nutrition, let's talk about that next. But before we get into that, just want to give a quick thanks to the sponsor, VivoSun, for sponsoring this video. The footage you're looking at right now was shot in a VivoSun 4x4 Pro grow tent. I got the grow tent kit, which comes with lights, fans, and a few other things. I've done a handful of grows in this grow space, and I've gotten some really good results. You can learn more about their grow tent kits down in the description section below. I'll leave a link. And you can use discount code MrGrow15. That discount code works on both Amazon as well as their website, vivosun.com. Okay, nutrition. Looking to maximize growth in the veg stage? Feed the plants properly. But that can be easier said than done for sure. I want to break this down between organic and synthetic. We'll start with organic growing. We'll use Stash Base by Stash Nutrients as an example. Now, if you're reusing soil, amending with Stash Base before you plant is ideal. And then it's typically every 3, I get away with 4 weeks when I'm doing some sort of top dressing onto the medium. That's going to ensure the plants have the nutrition they need in order to grow successfully, grow fast, grow vigorously. Another thing that you can add with that, which is a fantastic input, is worm castings. Worm castings not only provide the nutrition it needs, but also has that microbe life that really help breaking those amendments down, turning them into usable nutrients for the plants. You can also add in microbial inoculants. That'll help with the breakdown as well. I personally use Stash Blend by Stash Nutrients, which technically isn't a microbial inoculant. It's a plant additive because it has a bunch of nutrition in there as well, but there's microbes in there that can certainly help with the breakdown. Those things combined in an organic or all-natural growing style can certainly help increase growth speed and vigor. If using synthetic bottled nutrients, know that not all bottle lineups are created equal. I always recommend people follow the feeding chart, but you may want to do a reduced dose depending on if those nutrients are made for cannabis or made for some other plant. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that folks make is they start using a nutrient line like Fox Farm, for example, and they feed it full strength and then they see toxicity issues. And Fox Farm isn't really formulated for cannabis. So a lot of people will start with a reduced dose. But if you want a little bit more clarity, EC or ppm is something that you can monitor. In the veg stage, I personally like to aim for anywhere between 400 and roughly 1,000 ppm on a 500 scale TDS tester. And I give that big range because there's early veg and then there's later veg, right? Depending on how big your plants grow will really depend on how much you're feeding. So yeah, there's a pretty big range there. Of course, you want to dial in pH as well. If you're in soil, rough range is 6.0 to 7.0 pH. Hydroponic or soilless medias, 5.5 to 6.5 pH. You can narrow that down a little bit more. I like to narrow it down to 5.8 to 6.2 pH. Being in the correct range is going to make sure that your plants have the access to uptake those nutrients. So super important if you're looking for fast growth. Moisture level in the medium, that's another thing that if you got that dialed in, you can get some really good growth. Now, back in the day, it was really a guessing game. And I think for a lot of people, it still is a guessing game to where you're lifting the pot or sticking your finger in the medium and seeing if it's dry or not. If you want to get a little bit more accurate and find out what the moisture level is and kind of base your waterings off of that, you could get a moisture meter. There are a handful of moisture meters out there, everything from Blue Mat to EcoWit. VivoSun has a moisture meter. Some are more accurate than others, but it's something you can look into if you are looking to dial in that moisture level, which is super important when it comes to your plant's growth rate. Too much moisture in the medium, your plants can get waterlogged and there could be a stunting growth. Not enough moisture in the medium, there could be a dry back, which has some benefits, but could also slow down growth as well. Plant training and pruning. If you're looking to maximize growth, well, don't do any of that, right? If you only do low stress training and not do any high stress training like topping or super cropping, anything that's doing physical damage to the plant, if you're only doing low stress training where you're bending things down, well, you're lessening your chances of the plant having any stunning growth. So if I was aiming for the plant to grow as fast as possible, I wouldn't top at all. I would just train the plants, do leaf tucking as well. And I would try to avoid pruning as much as possible. I would really only take off branches or leaves, defoliation, right before flipping to flower, if I can get away with that. But sometimes you have a bushy plant and you want to make sure airflow is getting through that plant so there's not hot spots, humid spots in the middle of the plant, which could certainly lead to problems like powdery mildew is a huge problem for a lot of people who live in high humid areas. You need to do some form of defoliation so you don't come across that. But if you can avoid it, well, then there's less chances of you slowing down growth. But again, sometimes you need to do it. What tips do you have for maximizing growth in the veg stage? Let me know down in the comment section below. On the outro card here, the next video you can click on is 5 tips for early flowering stage. So once you get through the veg stage, learn some tips for what you can do in the early flowering stage. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace out, everyone.